A timeline of the Catholic Church in Australia. In 1788, the First Fleet arrived in Sydney Cove, and among its 1,044 convicts, there were 316 Catholics. More Catholics arrived in the following years, and many of them came from Ireland. In 1803, some members of the colonial government viewed Irish Catholics with suspicion. They did not want Catholics to gather as a community for Mass. For 30 years, the colonial government only supported the Church of England. The only exception was in 1803, when they allowed a convict priest, Father James Dixon, to celebrate Mass. The Mass that Father James Dixon was celebrating was soon stopped in 1804. For many years, Catholics had no priest and no Mass. They keep their faith alive by praying for their families and gathering for prayer in private homes. In 1817, a non-Catholic priest, Father Jeremiah O'Flynn, sailed into Sydney Cove to minister to Australian Catholics. Father O'Flynn celebrated Mass for the Catholics in Sydney whenever he could. Governor Macquarie was angry that the Catholics were conducting illegal worship services. So he ordered that Father O'Flynn be arrested. When Father O'Flynn was arrested in 1818, he was deported. He left behind the Blessed Sacrament at a private home in the Rocks area of Sydney, where Catholics could continue to gather and pray together. The Holy Spirit continued to work in the hearts of generous people who believed in the need of our church to grow in Australia. In 1820, there were no priests in the colony. Many Catholics still managed to practice their faith. Catholics like William Davis and James Dempsey found their ways to practice their faith. Their families would meet together in their homes for prayer services and the Rosary. William and James looked after anyone who was hungry or in trouble. When Catholics were condemned to death, James Dempsey is also known to have prayed with them on the scaffold before they died. There were many Catholics during these early years of colonisation who lived the gospel message of Jesus, even though they were unable to attend Mass regularly. In 1820, Father John Terry and Philip Connolly arrived in Sydney. They were the first priests to be recognised as the official chaplains or leaders of the Catholic Church in Australia. Father John Terry was responsible for starting the first Catholic school in Parramatta. In 1835, John B. Polding, a Benedictine monk and bishop, arrived in Australia to be Australia's first Catholic bishop. Bishop Polding organised the church into small regions called dioceses so that the priests could respond more effectively to those needs of the community. Consequently, in 1842, he became the first Archbishop of Sydney. By 1833, 10 Catholic schools in Australian colonies. These early schools were opened and run by lay people. Bishop John B. Polding arrived in Sydney in 1835 and took control of the Catholic schools. By 1836, where there were 13 primary schools in operation, 7 for the boys and 6 for the girls, and all have government support. In 1836, St Mary's Cathedral College in Sydney opens. Religious orders from overseas came to Australia. In 1838, 5 Irish Sisters of Charity arrived in Sydney in response to a request from the Archbishop B. Polding. They worked especially with women prisoners and orphans. Over time, new religious orders were founded in Australia, such as the Sisters of Good Shepherd and Sisters of St. Joseph. They started school for young Australian Catholics and opened their hearts and homes to the poor. Caroline Chisholm was confronted by the poverty and needs of newly arrived immigrants, especially the single females who had no financial or emotional support. She was so moved by their misery, she began to help them settle. So in New South Wales from 1838 and 1846, she dedicated her life to offering help, comfort and support to those in need of it. She did not worry about their nationality or religious faith. If they needed help, she was there for them. She personally settled 11,000 people on the land. St. Mary of the Cross MacKillop and Father Julian Tennyson Woods founded the Sisters of St. Joseph in 1866. At this time, they both opened the first Josephite school in Connolly, South Australia.